All right, well, welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today, I'm honored and excited to have on Patricia Kyritsi Howell. Once again, I want to say this is your third time on the show, Patricia.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is true. And we're once again by our special co-host, Rosalee de la Forêt. Welcome, Rosalee,
Happy to be here.
as per usual.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Well, this is great. Let's get this rolling here. Some of what we're going to talk about today is your second edition of Medicinal Plants of the Southern Appalachians. So we'll start there, and then we'll see where the conversation takes us. But actually, Rosalie, why don't you kick us off?
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Well, Patricia, you grew up in the tall grass prairies of Illinois, and then you found yourself in the Appalachians. And I'm curious if you have any early memories of that or any first whoa moments of getting into this entirely different ecosystem, one that's just so renowned too.
Yeah, I didn't really come to the Southern Appalachians until I had been through the uh, California School of Herbal Studies program that I took, the year-long training. And it was the next spring that I came to Georgia. I worked for many years in the music business as a sound engineer before I became an herbalist. And I was still doing this one production job in Georgia. And I came here and it was up in the mountains and in a really beautiful wooded location. And I went on a walk. And because I had just studied, herbalism and, was like very into field botany, I just looked up on this hillside and there was black cohosh, there was blue cohosh, there was Solomon seal, there were some, what looked to me like possibly ginseng. There was some, what's the other one that we use a lot around here? Maidenhair fern, just like all up this hill. And it was like, you know, kind of surreal to see them all in one place. I didn't know that they lived together, because I'd studied each plant individually. So, I mean, it just really was a magical moment to make that recognition. And it just planted something in me where, like, when I decided to leave California, I decided I wanted to come to Georgia and live in that environment. So, and
That's beautiful.
and
Such epic plants.
yeah, and I've since, found out that one of the ways that the Cherokee discussed or like described this area was the apothecary of North America,
Mm.
because
Hmm.
so many medicinal plants, and they traded a lot in medicinal plants because they were so abundant here.
Did you end up finding out whether that actually was ginseng or not? Or was it a hunch?
It was not. It was Virginia creeper, which is a vine that grows here. I don't know if either of you are familiar with it, but it's a vine, but it has a palmate five leaflet, low to the ground. And I have had people call me and say, "Oh my God, my backyard, it's covered in ginseng." There's like thousands of them out there because it's kind of a invasive plant, even though it's native. And so I would tell them go out and pull on it, and if it's a vine, it's not, because it would be connected. If it's not connected, I'll come over and look at it. You know.
Mm.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about the plants called them into the herbal world and they have those moments, in this instance, it feels like the plants called you to Georgia. They were like, we're going to put on such a spectacular show for Patricia that she can't say no to us.
Yeah, it was very seductive. Absolutely.
Do you still split your time between Georgia and Wisconsin, or are you just primarily in Georgia still?
No, I'm mostly in Georgia. I have a whole family in Wisconsin, so I do go up there, once a year for an extended visit. But
Gotcha.
no, too cold.
Yeah, it's a little chilly,
You would
especially.
know.
No, I
Yeah.
wouldn't know at all. Well, you do open the book with a dedication to your grandfather, Ioannis Kiritsis. Just
Mhm.
curious if, yeah, how did he shape your love of learning, and maybe shout him out a little bit?
Sure. Um, Well, my grandfather emigrated from Greece when he was about 19 years old, and he was a chef. He had been a chef in Athens. He was from my family's from the island of Milos, which is where the Venus de Milo was found, which is a small island about halfway between Athens and Crete. And so he got offered a job in Alabama. So he emigrated and worked as a chef in Mobile, where he met my grandmother. There's a big Greek immigrant community there in the early 1900s because of sponge diving. Was one of the things Greeks did there. So he, was a chef in a restaurant, and then his three brothers had immigrated to north of Chicago, to my hometown, Waukegan, and they had fishing boats, and then they sold fish on shore. And they talked him into coming up there and starting a restaurant. So that's how my family, and everyone got up to Illinois. But even though he, did kind of like a very manual labor kind of job his whole life, he was like a scholar. He would come home in the afternoon on his break and read the history of the French Revolution. And, these like really deep academic books, because he was curious about everything. And well, I was the first person to go to college in my family. So he was always pumping me for information, like, what do they say about this? And, really sort of abstract, deep things that even made me think twice. So I just loved that, he had his day job, and then he had the thing that he was passionate about, which was the world and history and things like that. So it just I really always admired that about him. And he was the only person in my family I could talk about things like social history and the history of labor unions and things like that. Nobody else knew or cared.
Did you carry forth the cooking gene? Do you make a lot of
I do
Greek
have
food? Yeah.
I do have the cooking gene, yeah. I've talked to you, both of you, before about that. I host a tour to Crete every spring, and there's a couple themes of it, and one of it is the traditional cuisine of Crete, because that was what the original studies of the Mediterranean diet were based on, the traditional Cretan diet. So when I take groups there, it's like we have a food seminar at one meal every day where we're talking about the innovations in the recipes. And they still use on Crete a lot of wild forage greens in their cooking.
Hmm.
Some of that had to do with, famine, especially after World War II. There was a lot of starvation on Crete. But it's considered like the most, it's like the center of meals in Crete that
Hmm.
people eat. And one time I went to visit some friends of mine who were potato farmers, and all the workers were at the table. We were all eating together, and they had like a plate with one little chicken cut up, and then they had a platter about this big with horta, cooked greens, mounded up like that. And everybody kind of took like an obligatory piece of chicken, but the greens, all the workers were just piling their plates high with it and dousing it with olive oil and lemon. And
Mm.
I was really surprised because, here in the United States, it's the reverse. Everyone's like, want a big piece of meat and then maybe tuck a few vegetables next to it. And there, they were just, the bitter greens was the key thing for them.
Just a quick break from the show to let you know about our herbal monographs page. So if you go to herbrally.com/monographs, you're going to see all sorts of different plant monographs. And basically what a monograph is, if you don't already know, you probably do, but it's a lengthy, well-written description of what a plant is. You're going to learn about its range, its Latin name, its common names, medicinal uses, personal stories a lot of times, because we have a wide variety of herbalists talking about these plants. So if you want to learn about a specific plant, I definitely recommend you go to herbrally.com/monographs, check them out. Some of them are even 20 pages long, some of them are 5 pages long, but they're really unique, and I highly recommend you check it out. Thanks so much, and now back to the show.
Well, thanks for sharing some insights about Crete and the food. I know we're going to dive into that a little bit later. Since we're all herbalists, we thought it'd be fun to talk about some of the plants in your book.
Sure.
And the first one I'm hoping we could dive into is that beauty right there, bloodroot. So this is actually a plant that I have long been fascinated with. I've
Mhm.
never met bloodroot in person,
Oh,
because it doesn't grow near me, but I've been long fascinated with it. I also feel like it's a plant that some people, I don't know, maybe there's like some myths or mystique around it too. So I'd love to hear more about bloodroot from you, Patricia.
well, first of all, I mean, in that picture, the reason I chose that photo is when it pops up, which will be here in this region. So I'm in the mountains of North Georgia, not far from Asheville, North Carolina. So it's the first spring ephemeral that shows up. So it's really dramatic because it has that big white flower, and everything else on the ground is brown at that time. Uh,
Mm.
it has a long history here in folklore. A lot of the I did a lot of work for some years with Foxfire and their archives. I don't know if you're familiar with the Foxfire books. They were published in the 60s. There was a writing project from some students here at the high school to go interview people in their family about what it was like to grow up here. And so since it was in the early 60s, there were actually people here who were born like right after the Civil War that they were talking to. And they were talking to them about medicine and food. And anyway, so I got a lot of insight into the folk usage by looking at some of that archival material. And it was when you cut the root open, it's rather small. It's like about the size of my little finger. Um, it exudes this blood red juice, and it looks like a cut off finger, really, when you do that. It's kind of knobby. So it was, yeah, there, my assistant has a beautiful photo of it. So that's what it looks like, cut down the middle. And it's ascaritic, so it kills healthy tissues. So pastes were made of it and applied topically for you know, uh, tumors and cysts and any kind of growth that somebody wanted to like try to really literally burn it off. And it would kill off all the tissue around the the tumor or whatever it was, and eventually, theoretically, it would fall off. So it was a very harsh treatment. But if something was topical, even warts to some degree, it would burn them off. It was a very painful procedure. It was also powdered and used as a snuff to clear the sinuses, which, okay, in the interest of being an honest person, I did try that. And I mean, it was like someone shot cayenne into both nostrils and all the way to the back of my head. I did breathe very deeply afterwards. Let me just,
Oh, I'm so glad you tried that, so I don't have to. I'm just
yeah.
gonna take your word on that
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
I think it's important if you put something in your book that you know that it is actually an action. But it also has an effect on the respiratory system. So very small doses act as a bronchial relaxant, higher doses act as a bronchial stimulant. So, but it is considered really, I think, one of the low dose botanicals because you do use, I mean, I never use it in any form but tincture, so I can really control the dosage.
Mhm.
I noticed this in the Papaveraceae poppy family.
Yeah.
Is that an indicator itself that it would be a low dose, or I guess there's probably other plants in the
I mean, it
Papaveraceae?
doesn't, yeah, it doesn't have any of the opioid compounds that we associate with, the other poppy plants.
Gotcha. All right. Any other comments, questions on bloodroot, Rosalie?
The plant.
Well, I'm curious if you would offer any cautions. I mean, you kind of did that it's a very intense plant to work with. Sometimes I think people might reach for it a little bit too soon. It's one that people, I think because it has such a dramatic effect,
Yeah.
it draws certain people to it. So, yeah, see if you have any cautions on that or
I mean,
considerations.
it is, yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, giving me the opportunity to refine that a little bit because it is a plant that I would never suggest somebody uses first off, as like a beginning. There's so many other herbs that you can be kind of sloppy with the dosage and still get really good effects, like elecampane and even colt's foot and things like that. But this is like, I consider herbs in two categories, tonics and activators. And the activators are like drugs. And when you're working with an activator, you've got to really be dosage conscious. And so this is on the extreme edge, kind of like an herb like lobelia, where you can, I mean, I don't think you could kill anybody with it, but you can make them sick with it. And definitely bloodroot would do that if you took too much of it. And I never combine it in a formula. I always use it as a single tincture because I really want to like do kind of what I think of as call and response. Like I want to give somebody 5 drops and see how their breathing changes and are they able, is the cough getting more productive or less spasmodic? And then, another dose in 10 minutes and see, like if I can manipulate them into doing what I want with that herb, to put it simply.
Yeah,
Definitely.
thanks for those tips.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we transition over to, are you in the sarsaparilla camp or sarsaparilla? Which one do you?
Sarsaparilla.
All right, cool. All right, sweet. Why don't we chat a little bit about sarsaparilla? And I noticed that was in the Araliaceae. I never knew that in the ginseng family.
Yeah. It does have leaves that do resemble ginseng leaves, but it's a much bigger plant. It's more shrub-like. Um, it, one of the things, so just to kind of talk Aureliaceae for a minute, is, ginseng, the two things I think ginseng does that makes it so effective for strengthening and restoring good health is it really increases respiration and improves digestion. And, I have like a background studying some traditional Chinese medicine, and it's those two processes that allow the body to create reserves and energy. So, with ginseng, we can talk about adaptogenic all day long, but what I notice when people take it is their breathing gets much deeper, much regular, and whatever they're getting more nutrients out of their food. I mean, I haven't done a scientific study, but I'm a pretty good observer, so I feel safe saying that. So sarsaparilla kind of just works on the respiratory piece of that. So whereas ginseng has these two body systems and even more, immune system and things like that. But those two, respiration and digestion, sarsaparilla is more on the lung and respiratory side. So I usually use it. I mean, I do use it in formula for cold symptoms, respiratory infections, but it's not hugely abundant here. So it is something that I tend to use for people who have a lot of lung weakness and more asthmatic type symptoms than a tendency to get a lot of colds. Yeah, so you can see it's got these really big leaves. And then towards the bottom of that picture, it has the same sort of umbel arrangement of the flowers and the berries that is classic in that Aureliaceae family.
I was going to ask you if the berries are used at all.
No, not that I know of. No.
Okay, cool.
They don't have any flavor,
Mm.
they're pretty nondescript.
Yeah.
So
Rosa-
that would be a good pie.
Rosalee, you got any questions?
Oh yeah, and that's
I don't.
too.
Go ahead.
You can see the shape of the flower and then the berry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Such a gorgeous book, Patricia.
Thank
Photos
you.
are so stunning.
Yeah.
Looks
It
like
was-
there was a lot of people that contributed to the photos in this book.
Yeah, I hit everybody up.
Takes the village.
Yeah. Well, I had quite a few, and then I had a friend here who is a photographer who I hike with quite a bit. So she had a lot, but then there were holes in it, and I was really like calling everybody that I could think of who I think took good pictures. I did get a lot of, well, I guess I shouldn't say some pictures that weren't so good that people donated, but I didn't end up.
It's good to have an abundance to choose from.
Right.
Yes, thank you. Mhm.
Well, if we want to move on to the next plant, I'd love to hear about sassafras. Sassafras is also something that doesn't grow here, but last year I spent some time in Arkansas and Michigan, and I just became really fascinated with this cute little guy here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's one of the most common trees in our area and throughout most of the eastern woodlands. Supposedly, I can't remember if I put this in the book or not, but when ships would get close to the coast of North America, they could smell sassafras because it was horrible. Um,
Huh.
and the other trivia about it is that it was the roots were the some of the first colonists were were taxed in sassafras roots. They had to harvest a certain amount for export to Europe. Because they were looking for spices, and sassafras, if you've never experienced it, is like it's a kind of like a natural root beer almost. It's got that kind of flavor profile. And even the leaves, I don't know if you, Rosalie, had a chance to, crumble the leaves or do anything, play around with them a little. The leaves and the stems and the roots are all very aromatic. Um, but
And a bit demulcent too, right?
The leaves definitely are very demulcent. And we're recording this on Mardi Gras. Today is and filet gumbo. The filet in filet gumbo is sassafras leaf used as a thickener. So you can dry the leaf and use it like we would think of using cornstarch or flour. And that's how it was used by Native Americans.
Yeah, I've made many a gumbo in my life. I've never made a filet gumbo though. I got to give that a try. I wonder if it would mess with the flavor too much, or if it's primarily used more as a thickening agent.
It's no it does add some flavor. I just was eating gumbo made with it
Nice.
the last 2 days. It's just it's kind of like a warm, almost cinnamony
Mm,
dimension to it, but it is traditional
yeah.
to have it in there. Yeah. Um, it's um, it's also just it's a good herb for covering up the flavor of bad herbs. And around here, it's a spring tonic because, when people didn't have refrigeration in the area where I live, there really wasn't, all the homes here weren't fully electrified until the mid 70s. So people were still eating a lot of primarily preserved food in their diet all winter long. So they use the roots as a spring tonic to clean the blood, drinking. And I still see people out digging it up and making tea out of it here.
Awesome. Well, again, we're talking about the second edition of Medicinal Plants of the Southern Appalachians by Patricia Kyritsi Howell. I'm sure we'll talk more about this throughout the conversation, but we did want to transition a little bit and talk about this whole concept of traditional publishing versus self-publishing. So yeah, why don't we dive into that? We were wondering, well, this was actually Rosalee's question, but what was it like to revisit a book that you had already originally written so many years ago?
Well, I did the first edition was published in 2006, and the word that I would use to describe it was humbling.
Mm,
I had only really lived in Georgia for about maybe a little over 10 years when let's see, 2006, yeah, about 10 years, and really only up here for about 6 years or 7 years at that point. And so now, I have all of so many more years of experience with the plants in the book. And it just felt shallow when I read it. Like I just had a glimpse of certain things, but now I know in a much more profound and I don't know, just I have a more solid relationship with all those plants over the years. Um, so that was the main thing. I mean, I didn't think it was bad or that I had wrong information in it. I just could tell that I was writing it from a perspective of very cursory understanding of those plants. So
So this book is essentially like 3 decades of plant experience wrapped up
yeah,
into one book. Pretty
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. And I've met so many more people here who, used herbs, when they were younger and learned more about, just some of the folk usage of the plants around here that I didn't know, and tried in my clinical practice to emphasize these plants that I wrote about in the book, um, because I really felt like I didn't want to use a lot of herbs that were imported from other places when I lived here. It just seemed absurd. So that was the main thing.
You added a bunch of new plants to this book too, right?
Only four.
Only four. Gotcha.
I took out a few like dogwood, which is, a really dramatic, beautiful plant that blooms here in May, but its main use was like as a substitute for quinine to treat malaria, and we really don't see a lot of that anymore. So it just seemed like it was more like random interest as opposed to I wanted to make it a little more useful. So.
Well, speaking of useful, so I live in Washington State near Canada. I haven't, unfortunately, spent very much time in the Southern Appalachians. Does someone, just in your completely biased opinion, Patricia, does someone have to live in Appalachia to get value from this book?
Yeah, no, in my unbiased opinion, most of the plants that grow that I wrote about, it's like you can think about that the plant community that I wrote about is very concentrated in the Southern Appalachians, but those plants have been repopulating North America since the glaciers receded. So I have a herbal colleague who's in Arizona who says that the woods around there have black cohosh in it, wild. So, that's way out of this range. But definitely everywhere east of the Mississippi, pretty much every plant that I wrote about, with maybe the exception of yellow root, which is very much a regional endemic. Pretty much all of the other ones I've seen in Wisconsin and Michigan, Arkansas, up in the Northeast in Maine, things like that.
And besides all that, I've been noticing through lines in like the herbal community. We collect mason jars, we collect bulk herbs, and we also collect like medicinal seeds, but then we also collect books. So we can't help ourselves. Like we have to have, a full library. And not to mention, herbalists also love to travel and go out and see different ecosystems. And so, yeah, this would be definitely a valuable book to have if you're, traveling to the Southern Appalachians.
I feel like I should just like interject to say like I have the book and I love it so much. So
there's that too.
That was like it was a setup question. Everyone should get the book. That's my opinion.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah. I am really happy how it turned out. And I would love to tell you, you and your audience more about the process because I have talked to so many herbalists who had a bad experience having their material published or just, didn't get the support that they'd hoped for. And not that self-publishing is for the weak of heart or the undisciplined, because it's not at all. But if you want your work to be preserved and presented in a way that you want to be able to do it your own way, it's definitely an option I think people should consider.
Yeah, I was curious, was the first edition traditionally published or was it self-published?
No, it was also self-published, but what happened is that I was working on the book and I was doing some lectures at the University of Georgia and the press, which is down in Athens, Georgia, and they approached me and asked if they could have first look at my manuscript because they were very interested in it. So I did share it with them and they sent it to some reviewers. But then what happened was they said that I would need to provide studies supporting all of the claims that I made in the book for what the plants did medicinally. And so we had a long conversation about folk medicine and that these are plants that cannot be made into drugs, so they're not of interest in the realms of people who do that kind of research looking for pharmaceuticals. And so then they suggested maybe that I find somebody who was an ethnobotanist with a PhD who would sign on as my co-author so they could justify it academically. I was so furious. I just took the book back from them and I pouted for a while, 6 months or so. And then I heard about somebody who was teaching a self-publishing workshop in Atlanta, and I went to it and got really inspired to redo the book. And I also changed the book a lot because I had been being cautious about what I said about the medicinal actions of the plants, knowing that, someone else was going to have to look it over. And not that I think I added anything that was risky, but I definitely wanted it to be useful for people who, just went out in their backyards and harvested these plants and wanted to use them for their own health, to take the mystery out of it.
Yeah,
And I
well,
was,
you do have a lot of acknowledgments about all the different herbalists. I recognized a lot of the names in there, so you were in good hands with people helping you edit the book and make sure that what you were saying wasn't too outlandish, and you know. We are going to get into some of the nitty gritty about traditional versus self-publishing. I'm just curious if you want to kind of give an overarching description of why you chose to self-publish in the first place.
well, I didn't at first. I didn't even know such a thing existed. So that's why I was looking at different publishers and went and was, was flattered that a university press was interested.
Yeah.
And when I saw that there was going to be censorship, basically, and then I, found out how to do it, all the pieces. Um, I wanted it to be authentic. I didn't want it to be dumbed down in some way. And so, I decided I'm going to just do this myself and make it the way I want to. I couldn't at that time, which, 2004 and 2005, I really didn't have the resources to publish a book with photographs because self-publishing was in a very different place then. And, uh, it was, way beyond my reach to do that. So, now 20 years later, I did have what I had made a plan for. Actually, it was one of my COVID things. I don't know if this happened to either of you, but during COVID, it was like, well, if we survive this, this is what I'm going to do when this is all over. I had all these. I wanted to go see Yo-Yo Ma perform live. I wanted to, I like had this little bucket list, and one thing was to do my book over with pictures and make it, beautiful. And I really also wanted to be able to show the plants at different stages of their growth. Because one thing that I think especially as people are learning field botany, it's frustrating that most books just sort of show them when they're in full flower, and that's and the plants change so much through the seasons. So my goal was really to, show some of the more dramatic stages of a plant's growth in the book. And I think if I'd
It's
gone with another publisher, they wouldn't have paid for all those photos.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's true. That's interesting to hear about your experience with the university press, Patricia, because like they were so stringent and so it felt like, it'd be inauthentic to you and be limiting versus like I see some like, traditionally published books by big publishers. I wish they would have been a little bit more selective because they are, publishing things that are just outright not true, like they're just kind of doing more hyped stuff or whatever. So it's kind of an interesting, like even within traditional publishing, there's probably this realm of standards, I guess we could say.
Yeah, I also think it has to do with the scope of the press itself. So University of Georgia does a lot of books on plants of this region. So they had reviewers who, had a lot of background in that area
Mm-hmm.
and could, give them feedback like, oh, I don't know, this isn't, this sounds like it could be dangerous if somebody did this.
Right. Yeah, they had a different lens on
Yeah,
versus I think maybe some big publishers are kind of like their only concern is how much can we sell, right? The quality, the standards doesn't matter. It's really a selling thing.
yeah.
Well, this, I think this is such a great conversation to have because there's a lot of people out there, herbalists who want to publish a book, who are working towards that and wondering about things. And so it's great to hear your perspective. And one thing we are wondering is what freedoms does self-publishing give you that maybe you might be restricted in other ways? Like we talked about, university press was very restrictive. But yeah, what other things might we just experience more freedom to publish the book we want if we self-publish?
Well, truth be told, I have not worked with a traditional publisher to see what that process is like, with them wanting to change things. So I had
Mm.
complete freedom to, put little jokes in, to, do whatever I wanted in that way and decide, what all the appendices would be, things like that. And I mean, I know from friends and colleagues who've published books, they don't necessarily just say, how much material do you have? Let's publish it. There's like guidelines for, this is a package and this is how many photos and this is how many pages. So, I was like a spendthrift. I was like, "Ha- I want everything in here and I don't care how much it costs. Because
Mm.
I also just, I'm getting older and certainly not ready to hang up my herbal hat, but I definitely feel like this is what I had to share with the world about what I know about plants. And I wanted it all to be there. So I think that when people do it with do work with a publisher, no matter what size, their voice can be altered, is my observation. Not to mention, I think the other thing that really attracted me to this is that I'm in control of how long this book exists.
Mm.
A lot of
Mm.
times publishers will, see that sales are not great and they will just stop publishing it, remainder it, and that's the end of the book. And I didn't want that to happen.
Mm. Interesting.
Yeah, I was actually approached to write a book. It's all like in my head right now. Just the thought of sitting down and writing a book just sounds so daunting. But so I wrote up the outline. I wrote up like the proposal. I spent all this time formulating this idea and creating this idea, and then I sent it to the publisher, and they wanted to make so many creative changes that it started to feel like, well, this isn't really the book that I want to write anyways. So I don't know what kind of question I'm having there, but it's like if I'm going to write a book, I want it to be like from my heart and soul, because really, what's the point of writing a book? I mean, really, in my opinion, you could correct me if I'm wrong. Well, both of you have published numerous books, but like this is just an idea that lives in my head. I want to like share it with the world, and I want to share it with the world in the way that I want to do it. I don't want it to end up becoming like this, like kind of this generic coffee table book or something like that. I want it to be an expression of who I am. So I don't know if either of you have any comments on that, but that's kind of the struggle that I keep coming back to. Like I want full creative freedom, and I want to be able to put out into the world what my heart and soul is telling me to do.
Well, we have this thing here called capitalism,
Oh
and
yeah.
the result of that, most people who are going to pay to have your book printed want to make sure they make their money back. So
Sure.
it's a different set of parameters. I mean, I don't know, Rosalie, you've worked with several different publishers, I think, right? And have had different experiences, or what, you're really the authority on, how much of your voice do you feel like came through for, now I'm interviewing you. Came
Yeah, my
through.
first couple of books, I had a lot of freedom, actually. I was very, very little restriction. I kind of forgotten about this, but my third book is a coloring book. It's a naturalist coloring book. And we took it to a publisher. And that publisher got back to us and said they couldn't publish it unless we had a Native American as a co-author. And it was the weirdest thing because it was a naturalist coloring book that was completely written, completely illustrated, completely done. And they were like, no, you have to have a Native American as a co-author in order to publish this. And it was like, it had nothing to do, there was no Native American spirituality. There was, like, it was just the weirdest thing. And I was just like, that would just, again, that like authenticity thing, like you're just doing that for like show then, like it was very strange. We actually had Elaine Timontois, who's a Metau native. She actually contributed significantly to the book and was like, a part of the book. So it was just a strange thing that, yeah, but they wanted something else. So yeah, that's just weird things happen, I guess. Like you said, when you get more
Because it
people
was
involved.
was it a press that did a lot of books in that genre? And that's
They did do like naturalist books, but
yeah,
it was a big jump to be like
yeah.
naturalist. Again, no spirituality or philosophy or anything in there. So kind of like how they said like, oh, maybe you can find an ethnobotanist to sign on. It's like, well, the book is done. So that would just be like fake,
Yeah.
like just for show. That's weird.
Oh,
We self-published,
I was going to
so
ask.
okay, yeah.
that's how that ended up.
The ending to that story was you self-published. Yeah. So a similar experience. So you know what, Mason, to go back to what you just said about, your idea of, what you would do. I think that's the reason to pursue self-publishing is, your vision. You don't want to alter your vision.
Mm,
And the other thing is I know that some people, some colleagues of mine have published books that weren't well marketed or distributed, and they ended up doing all of that themselves. And they might as well have self-published because in the end they were the only one really out there promoting the book.
right.
That is a very odd thing that I think is misunderstood in the traditional publishing world. And I don't understand, I mean, I don't understand it, but it's like the publisher is actually not in charge of marketing the book. Very few publishers do that. You think they would do more because, like we said, they want to like recap the money that they're putting into it, but they really don't do that. So it's
Mhm.
just a weird, fascinating thing. So when people tell me like, "Oh, I'm disappointed they didn't market it," and it's like, well, that's actually not their role, weirdly enough, you know. So that's like, so you're supposed to hire a publicist who then takes that on. But
The
that
author
can,
is supposed to?
yeah.
The author? Oh,
Yeah, it's like a separate thing. Like publishers are not marketers.
okay. They give birth to the hard copy,
Right.
and then everything else is up to other people.
And I would say there is a range, like some publishers will do more and some will do less.
Right,
Why they don't do more, again, I don't understand because it's in their best interest. It's a
right.
mystery to me, but it is just how it is.
I mean, and to be honest, it is a lot of work. I mean, to self-publish a book. 2024, I mean, I didn't do anything else, but work on the book every day. I mean, my friends were like, when I finally published it and had a party, they were like, God, we just thought you were being weird because every time we said, let's do this hike, let's do this, you were like, oh no, I have to work on my book. No, I have to work on my book. And it went on so long that I think they thought, is this one of those things that, she's delusional and she's at home and she's working on her book. So I was very proud to actually show them something, that it did exist. Um, but you do have to kind of step out of the fray, I think, to write a book. When I look at someone like, like an author like Stephen King, who just pumps out these huge books, I think the man must have servants. There is no way that you could do that. And still empty the garbage and wash your clothes and things like that.
Basics. Well, I'm imagining like, so that year that you spent just writing, 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 I imagine since you're self-publishing that there is probably other skills you had to learn to self-publish that kind of went beyond writing. I'm curious what those might be.
Sure. Well, I worked with a very good book designer, very closely with her. So I learned a lot about choosing photographs in a way that, so for example, if there's a page in the book where there's two pictures of the same plant, sometimes when they were printed, they came out different colors. And the foliage color was a little more yellow and a little more blue. So the book designer I worked with, we went through page by page, and she would say, okay, I'm going to put more magenta in here, and you tell me when it looks like the plant.
Whoa.
And she would like, turn the knob a little more, a little more, a little more. And then I'd be like, that's it. And then, she would like match it. And then also, just the whole graphical aspect of AI. We could take a photo that had a crumpled leaf in it, and she could outline it and say, show me what's behind this. And that would disappear and you could see the other foliage that was behind it.
Whoa.
So I mean, it didn't make me want to be a book designer, and it gave me great respect. And because it was my book, I also had my finger on it that closely, to make sure, because, now I look at other people's books, on herbs, and I see that that isn't the case. The plants will look like very different colors on different pages. And so I would imagine that, a publisher might not be willing to spend 5 hours on a one monograph adjusting that, right?
Hearing that just makes me see like why this book, like when you pick up the book and look at it, I mean, it's stunning. And now I'm getting like, oh, the amount of care and thought and intentionality that went into it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. But it was a lot of time and effort, and and there were times where I was like, oh, do I really care? I just want to get this over.
You want it to be done right, though, and you did it right. And I'm just going to randomly ask you this. I'm going to embarrassingly plead ignorance. I actually don't know what the plant is on the front cover.
That is yellow root, Xanthorrhiza simplicissima.
Oh, I don't know that one. Why'd you choose that one for the cover?
Because it's endemic to this region. It's pretty much only found in the Southern Appalachians. Occasionally you see it, like maybe up in Virginia or something, but it's really abundant here. And it is a central plant in Appalachian folk medicine. And
Rosalee, did you know that one?
I didn't.
Okay. All right.
Thanks for calling me out. I was like, phew, I escaped that. Now you just called me out. Thanks, Mason. Appreciate that.
You're most welcome. Sorry, I interrupted you, Patricia.
No, I was just gonna add to that the amazing Stephen Foster, herbalist and photographer, like maybe 12 years ago, I bought like 6 of his photographs from, that I could use any way I wanted to. He had a whole process, and that was one of them.
Oh, cool.
From him that I loved. And so when I wanted to use it on the cover, my book designer was like, a black cover. And so I went to a bunch of local bookstores, and this is a tip for self-publishers. And I looked at, the plant section and the regional, there's a million books about the Blue Ridge Mountains and everything. And all of them had either a flower or a mountain scene on them. And so when you saw them like on a shelf face out, they were all bluish. They all had flowers. They all had mountains. And so I was like, okay, no flowers, no mountains. What am I going to do? Yeah, because the first edition had passion flower on it, which in retrospect I would not have done, but just because it's such a tropical plant and not even really used medicinally in this area very much.
Yeah, I've heard that tip before where you have a different book color to like stand out amongst the rest. Plus, you chose black. You're a little rock and roll too, aren't you?
Well, the picture was black. The picture,
Oh, okay.
the photo from him did have a black background.
Gotcha.
But then, like looking at that, what the designer did is she took the plants separately and moved them so that we could put the title on the cover, so it was pretty manipulated for our own purposes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, you brought up capitalism earlier, and why don't we talk about what everyone wants to know about? Do you have any intel on whether self-publishing versus traditional publishing is more profitable?
I haven't seen the profitable part of my self-publishing project yet. But that could be a lot because I invested so much in the actual design of the book. It was a significant amount of money that I put into that process. But I don't know, Rosalee, you might be in a better position that it's, I think that for most herbal colleagues of mine who've published books, what the benefit is that your name gets out there and you get invited to speak and teach, and your platform gets bigger, but not necessarily because you're raking in so much money from the books. And then there's such an absurd number of herb books being published every 5 minutes. It's a very, obviously very diluted. There's some pretty simplistic herb books being published, but I don't know anyone who felt like it was a significant new revenue stream. Emily, I mean, Rosalie, what do you want to say about that? You feel like you
Well, I
can?
feel like I'm in a position of privilege in that I had bestsellers, and so it was pretty significant for me, but it's rare, like you said, that I've talked to other herbalists. You have to sell many, many thousands of copies really to see that happen. And
Mhm.
as we talked about, a lot of publishers don't promote the book. And as you mentioned too, there's so many herb books being put out there in the world right now. So I think it is increasingly difficult.
Well,
Not to,
when I went to that excuse me,
no, you're good.
when I went to that workshop with a man named Tom Bird, who was out of Sedona, Arizona, is who I learned all this about self-publishing. He was very clear. He said, if you have a public platform, self-publish. If you don't have a public platform and you're a bank teller who wrote a fabulous book, give it to a publisher because nobody knows who you are. Nobody cares that you wrote a book.
Mm,
Mm,
And, okay, J.K. Rowling is maybe an exception, somebody who, didn't have any platform and wrote a book that, went through the roof. But I think in our field, that does make a significant difference. Would you agree, Rosalie? I mean, in your situation, you were, a known entity before you published your first book. Am I correct?
I was, and I feel like the launch of my first book, was just as much work as writing it. So, John and I from Learning Herbs, John and I put so much into that. I mean, it was months and months and months of work, and it was all very like there's a game to play. We played the game, and raised our pre-sales up significantly, which then got the book in Costco. So it kind of like builds on itself.
Right.
Um, but literally, I mean, I would almost say even like the launch of the book was more stressful than the writing of it, and possibly even more work. So that's like a whole other thing. But now a lot of traditional publishers only want you if you do have a platform, if you do have an audience.
mm.
So that's kind of another because they want that combined effort together.
Exactly.
But usually, like you can't just tell people I wrote a book,
Right.
buy it. That doesn't really work, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, and I read the launch book as I was doing all this, and I think I was so tired from doing the book. I just said, "Wow, that sounds like a lot of work." I'll just
Yeah,
say, um,
yeah, definitely.
so
So, dear listener,
Yeah.
please go purchase this book. And sorry to interrupt, Rosalie. Just real quick, is there a place that you want folks to most benefit you and all the work you put into this to purchase this book?
it can be it can be purchased on my website,
Okay.
which is just my name, Patricia Kyritsi Howell, or wildhealingherbs.com will take you there too, if you do that as a search. But it is the other thing is the printing company. Can I say some more about the self-publishing, why I chose some of this?
Please.
Please.
Okay, so um, a lot of times when people self-publish a book, they write the book, they do all the pieces for that, they get the Library of Congress number, the ISBN, whatever, and then they have it printed, and then they're responsible for all the distribution of the book, like getting it on Amazon or getting it on, Barnes and Noble or whatever. And there is a printing company called Ingram Spark, and it is owned by Ingram's, which is the public, which operates the database that pretty much every bookstore in the United States and also quite a few globally use for their inventory. That's how they order their books, is through Ingram, big distributor. So by becoming a publishing company myself, using Ingram Spark as my printer, the minute it was uploaded into their catalog, it appeared everywhere in Ingram's database. So that literally happened overnight. I
Hmm.
didn't have to do anything to get it out there. It was on Goodreads. It was, if you go into any bookstore in the country, you could order a copy of my book and they'll print it and ship it to them, to the bookstore. I don't
That's
have to
such
do.
a huge game changer. I mean, that's massive. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's what we did with the coloring book too. So it was a really incredible thing. And I think that one thing makes a huge difference in the decision between self-publishing and traditionally publishing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I have, a good friend who published an amazing book a couple years ago, and she's selling them, but they're in her basement, and every time someone orders a book, she has to wrap it up and label it and take it to the post office. So and because of the way they do this, if I'm going to do a speaking engagement, I can order 50 books at wholesale pricing and then sell them for retail. So if I go speak at a library for free, I can still make money because I'm selling my books at a significant profit to myself.
When someone
I have a
orders
question for
these,
you.
oh, go
Sorry.
ahead,
No,
Rosalie.
you go.
Me? It's a
You
simple,
go.
it's a simple question. When someone does order it the way that you were talking about through like a bookstore, are these being produced like print on demand or are they already existing somewhere?
Print on demand I mean, I don't know if they have a stash of them once they reach a certain amount of, like they're selling them regularly, so they just have a little stash. But yeah, it's print on demand. They print a copy and ship it to the bookstore.
Cool. All right, Rosalie, you can ask your intelligent question now.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Right.
It's a question you wrote, so I'll give it to you
Okay.
as being intelligent. So I would say, a couple decades ago, there was kind of a stigma around self-publishing. Do you feel like that's changed now?
Yeah, I do. Because I do think a lot of the people who are self-publishing are, you know, giving their books the attention that they need to be visually, you know, put together well and organized well and all those things that a book has to have. But I do feel like there's a lot of people that I know who've written some books self-published that have such good information, but they look so, mimeographed almost, if you know
Yeah,
what a mimeograph is,
I know.
um, that they don't get the attention they deserve because of the visual. Um,
Mhm.
so, you
Yeah,
know,
something if it feels homemade, it's kind of hard to give it the respect. Yeah.
yeah,
But like just your book is so stunning. Obviously, you put so much into that and laid out and everything as you've been discussing. And I feel like when a book is like that, I don't even look to see if it doesn't cross my mind, is this
Totally.
self-published? Is it traditionally published? Like it's a beautiful book and that's just, we're done. That's all I need
right,
to know.
right, yeah.
No, it's a good point, Rosalie. I would have never even like guessed whether it was traditional or not, so sweet.
So
Um,
yeah,
go
let's encourage everybody out there, including you, Mason, to
ahead.
get with it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I thought about recording a little video, and just putting it on my website because I get contacted by herbalists all the time saying, "How'd you do that?" So hopefully the people will hear this and learn something from it.
Yeah, that'd be a valuable resource.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we kind of covered this, but if there's an herbalist out there that wants to write a book, do you have any recommendations on how they choose between traditional or self? Or did we kind of already cover that?
I mean, I think one thing is their resources because it is a financial investment to have a book public designed, really the design work, and to step out of your daily life enough to do something unpaid for months and months at a time. Do you have other things you can do to support yourself while you're up in your garret, writing your book? Um, so, for some people that might not be an option. And getting a publisher to take the book is the only way it would happen. Um, so it is, it's a big job to do it. You get the freedom, the creative freedom, but there is an investment that may or may not ever come back.
Yeah. Well, it's a big topic. Before we shift gears, I'm curious if there's anything else that we didn't cover about self-publishing that you'd want to get out there to the audience.
I mean, just sort of, and this kind of piggybacks on what you said about your book manuscript, Mason, is, I think that it's so important to have these authentic, unfiltered voices published and shared. And, when I think about herbalism in general, and I would say this to my students all the time, it's like, there's, we can like look to the past and there's like this lineage of all these people, even people that were my teachers when I was first studying herbs, who, have gotten older and don't really work in the herb world so much anymore. Um, that that information being passed through all those lineages, and to see yourself as somebody who's going to make your contribution to the next generation. It doesn't stop with us. It's like we learn it, we interpret it, we express it in our own way, and then somebody else takes it and changes it a little and adds to it. So it's almost, to me, it feels like an obligation to do something like that, to put it out there.
Rosalie, could I ask one more follow-up question?
I guess.
All right, thank you.
If you're the co-host, I'll let you.
That's right. This may be more of a broad philosophical question, but do books still matter like this day and age? With like so much YouTube videos out there, so much content online, you got blogs, you got all these things. Why do books still matter? I mean, I read books, so I guess maybe it's a rhetorical question, but like, in your opinion, Patricia, and feel free to chime in too, Rosalie, why are we still writing books out here with all the technological advancements?
I mean, they may become obsolete, in the next 20 years. I don't know. I mean, I'm a bibliophile, I love the way books feel. I don't read books online. I don't do Kindle. I like to hold a book. One of my friends said the reason she likes to have a book is if it pisses her off, she can throw it across the room. Couldn't do that with this electronic device.
Yeah.
But I love, having a book get worn. I've had students, come to my classes and bring a copy of my first book that has like post-it notes and things hanging out of it, and it's dirty. And it just thrills me because I like to see what books travel and get used. So, I mean, the sensual aspect of books, I hope and pray it continues to be significant. But I don't know, I'm not keeping up with everything like some people are anymore, I don't mean to do like a geezer rant, but it's like I don't really care about Instagram or TikTok or any of that stuff because I said what I had to say. I'm kind of done, in the realm.
Maybe this is kind of like a vain reason to collect books, but I had a guest over the other day, and one of the first things they did was look at my bookshelf, and they're like, "Ooh, ooh, ooh, oh, that's cool." It's like a good conversation starter at the very least.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do have some important thoughts on this.
let's hear it.
I'm watching Starfleet Academy right now, which if we had another Appalachian herbalist on, Phyllis Light, she would care about more than any of you do. But that takes place hundreds of years in the future, and they still have books. So that's a good sign.
Hey.
But more seriously,
thanks for that reassurance.
yeah. But more seriously, there's something like to be said about just, an Instagram, YouTube, those things are created so quickly. And we know that there's such sometimes questionable or substandard information being spread that way because it's fast, it's easy, it's consumed fast, it's easy, it's it's entertainment goes in one ear, out the other. Sometimes that's better because of substandard information, but it's just like this different thing. Patricia, you've created a legacy piece. You've taken 3 decades and put it into a book in a very thoughtful, intentional way that really is a gift to the herbal community. And it's the time it takes, it's the physicality of it that really makes an impression in a way that, YouTube shorts and Instagram reels is just, I don't think will ever replace. So.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah. That's more of the instant gratification realm as opposed to, rereading. I just finished reading, there's a new biography of James Baldwin that came out, I think last year. And it's a big fat book. But the writing in the book was so beautiful. And, I would go back and reread a paragraph just to enjoy the way it was written. And I know that I have some friends who are listening to it on Audible books, and they say they wish they could see how that sentence looked. It's such a different experience to have somebody read it to you. Plus, all those audiobooks, I find people's voices really annoying, and And I find very few that I like the voice of the person reading the book. So
Hmm. Makes me think like CDs and records and stuff, they have not taken the place of live music.
yeah,
I'm gonna go 6 Tori Amos concerts this year. And I'll buy the CD, but one does not replace the other.
right, right.
There's your Tory drop.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I did it. I did it. We're getting kind of close to the end, so I wasn't sure, but good time to switch gears here.
Yeah.
What you got?
Yeah.
What's the next gear here?
Well, we want to like
Well,
fully promote what you're up to in the Wild Crete trip, but I'll let Rosalee kick it off here.
yeah, I was going to take credit for this, but all the questions came from me, so I'm a late addition here. Well, your Crete trip is, as you know, I think sounds like such a dream. I got like 10 emails from you in a very funny way, and I was like, oh man, it just looks so incredible. So many different ways. Even just what you said earlier was so enticing about, just really diving into the food and everything. And the first question that we have for you is just why Crete specifically?
Great. I do have family roots on Crete. My great grandmother was born in Western Crete in the village of Appalachia. But my former partner um, had lived on Crete many years, and so when we, got together, she had a house on Crete, so we went there every year for 3 or 4 months, and I spoke some Greek. She spoke a lot of Greek. She was very fluent in Greek. Had a lot of friends, had been there, had done actually her PhD dissertation research on Crete. So that's how I got into it at a different level. I mean, I knew that my great grandmother was from there. I had never been to Greece. So I got introduced to this whole community of hers on Crete. And she did these tours or had done some tours about some of the ritual practices of the Minoans based on their artifacts that were found. And we did some tours based on that, but they didn't really attract a lot of people. So I said, well, I want to do one on food and herbs. So the next year we did a food and it filled up immediately. And so that's what I've done ever since is the food and herbs tours there. And this year's tour is a little different because most of my connections there were really like rural villagers who I met, through friends and living in a small village. Our house was in a small village. And they were all very folk herbalists, but none of them really worked, had any concept of like endangered plants of Crete or how plants were being preserved or conservation or any kind of research about them. And in my most recent trip to Greece in the fall, I met some farmers who were doing conservation work on plants that are endangered in Crete. And so I got introduced to a whole new community of people who are kind of doing the equivalent of what a lot of people are doing in the United States, like identifying high demand plants, studying them, how to grow them in a way that, they'll thrive, but can be cultivated. And I think that mirror aspect of what's happening there is really interesting. Um, and a lot of the plants of Crete are things, they're just your standard Mediterranean herbs, thyme, sage, oregano, that are everywhere. They're vitex, they're really, really common. So they're not that much exotic plants. They're all things we pretty much already know about.
Know
Yeah, I
and
didn't.
love.
Yeah. I wanted to say it's so Patricia, I'm going to bump this in the queue. I'm going to make this the next episode we release. So, because it is somewhat time sensitive, we want people to, learn more and potentially buy tickets to go to travel with you to Crete. It's
For sure.
May 2nd to 11th,
Mhm.
2026, and that you could find out more and register at patriciakyritzihowell.com. Of course, we'll leave links to the exact landing page in the podcast and YouTube show notes. But yeah, so I had this experience once where so I was raised in Oregon my entire life, And then I did this cross country travel when I was in my early 20s, and I stopped in Des Moines, Iowa, and my dad's from Iowa, and I remember being like, man, these people kind of talk like me. These people kind of walk like me. Like it felt so. It was I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about it. It was the strangest experience. I was like, I definitely have like a lineage here. The Hutchisons came from Iowa for a long time, and so yeah, I felt very at home from there. Even though I feel like definitely a product of the Pacific Northwest. Do you get that feeling when you go to Crete?
Yeah, I mean, the first time I went to Greece, landed in Athens, and my cousins came by the hotel and picked us up, and they said, we're going to go to dinner, but there's going to be a christening for my grandfather was one of 12 children. So the family is massive, so I didn't even know these cousins that we were going to the christening of somebody, but we went and to the church, and we were standing in the church during the christening service, and my partner turned to me and she said, everyone in this room looks like you. And then I started looking at everybody. It's like, oh yeah, this is the Kyritsi family.
Mm.
These are my people. But I feel so at home in Greece in general, but in Crete in particular, that if someone said you can't go back to Georgia or leave, I would be. In fact, when I'm there, my friends there, when I get there, they go, "How was your trip?" Because in their mind, I just went away on a trip somewhere, but
Oh,
right?
that's cool.
Yeah. I'm just getting ready to leave in a few weeks. Um, and I'll be there for about 3 months this spring, but then the group will come over in May for a few days.
Amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, I know that feeling exactly.
One thing,
Go ahead.
sorry to interrupt there. One thing that really struck me when I was talking to you about your trip, and you kind of mentioned it here too, is that you go, like, this is not a corporate trip. You aren't staying at Best Western, and you're visiting like these rural places, interacting with people. And you've done this many times now before, and we're wondering if you had a story to share about like what that is like to go to these villages and just hang out with Greek folks and talk about plants.
Well, one of the things that we do with our groups is I send them some written literature before the tour, and also we spend some time orienting people about culture and customs. And we really, one of the most meaningful pieces of feedback I've gotten from my friends in Crete is that my groups don't act like tourists. They act like
Mhm.
guests.
Mm.
That's sort of how I frame things with my group. I say, even when you go into a restaurant in a small village or a taverna, um, and I prearrange pretty much every meal. I go and talk to everybody and say, because there's like a storyline going through the meals. That there's first we're having this version, and then we're having it with more complex herbs, and then we're having, the seasonal iteration. And when you go into a restaurant like that and they're expecting you, and then they've cooked this food that, I've asked them for, um, that, when we leave, you know, I say to them, you'll notice that the owner and maybe some of the people from the kitchen will come out and stand at the doorway of the taverna and, like say goodbye to you like you would to somebody who came to your house. And I say to them, you don't have to know Greek. You can just say thank you, but just know that in their mind, you were just a guest in their house, not somebody who just came in and paid. And we have that whole idea of slow food. And when people go to Greece, they really, or especially in the rural areas, they realize you cannot have a meal in less than 2 or 3 hours. It's just not possible. If you're in a hurry,
Yeah.
get some street food because usually there's like one person cooking in the kitchen and one person waiting on the tables. And as they prepare the food, they bring each dish. So it's like you're there for 3 hours and first some dolmades, grape leaves come out, and then a little while later some salad comes out, and then another 20 minutes goes by, and some roasted potatoes come out. So you just taste everything as it comes, and you don't rush at all, and it's just a very different dining experience, unless you go to a touristy place, and then it's like, hurry up and eat. We have more people to come in here, you know. So that that aspect of it is something that I really try to bring my students who come with me into understanding and participating.
Mm.
I love that you
Ama-
said like guest, not a tourist, because that's how I like to travel. Like when I travel places, I want to feel like a guest. I don't want to feel like a tourist. Yeah, very, very special to me to have that sensation. And really like you get that through like these doors opening through trips like this, where you get the introduction and yeah, and then that warm welcome too. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. And in Cretan culture in particular, hospitality is a way that you achieve status. Your status is based on your
Mm.
ability to be hospitable. And so, I also, one thing I have to tell people when we're there is don't admire anything too much, because if you do, someone will give it to you.
Hmm.
Like one time, one of my friends was with our group and she had this really cute jacket on. And one woman was like, "Oh my God, I love that jacket. Let me look at it. Can like I would do, if somebody had a jacket, I would be like, "Oh my God, where did you get it? It's so great." And so then my friend like leaned over and she said, "Should I give it to her?" And I was like, "No, don't give it to her." You know, but that would be the thing. It's like, "Oh, this would make you happy, so I should do it."
Mm.
Mm.
It's beautiful. Anything else you want to tell us about the Crete trip coming up?
Well, I mean, we do kind of it's a slow moving trip. Even when we hike, it's going to be like how herbalists hike,
Hmm.
10 steps, stop, talk about it, look it up, think about it, taste it, and go on. So I did have one time this woman came on the tour, and it's not a stressful tour in terms of how far we hike and all of that. And when I sent her the feedback form, her complaint was that she didn't get enough of an upper body workout during the tour. And I was like, okay, you didn't read the fine print. Because I really wanted people to sink into the landscape, to sort of notice the rhythm of life around them. And that kind of travel isn't for everybody. So like you just said, Rosalie, the idea of being a guest, there are people, especially Greece is such a mythical, iconic place. People come with a list, I want to see Delphi, I want to see this, I want to see that. And that's not what I'm doing.
Yeah. It's a special trip. I have no doubt that I might see you there one day.
I
And I
hope.
think if anybody is like, thinking about it, just go for it. I mean, this is the kind of things that um, fill your heart and will be a treasured memory for a lifetime. So it's been such a pleasure to be here. I'm so glad that I got to crash this party. And it's always a just special pleasure to be hanging out with you, Patricia, and also you, Mason. Um, is there anything else? I mean, it's just been such a fabulous conversation talking about your book, talking about self-publishing, talking about Crete. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I mean, no, but I mean, I guess I would just say that to the herbalists out there listening to this, consider the importance of you making a contribution in whatever form, and then for somebody the book form might not be appealing in a blog or a Substack or something, but I just think that there's our work with herbs is so experiential and so individual, and that hearing everybody's stories and experiences is so valuable. And you don't have to be an expert to contribute to the conversation. So I hope anybody out there is saying, well, I would never know enough, can hear that and think about adding their 2 cents to the conversation.
I love that.
I love
Beautiful
that
way to
too.
wrap up the show. Yeah, go ahead, Rosalie.
Oh, just that experiential piece, because it is true. Like we're all out there experiencing the plants. We all have our perspectives, and you don't have to be 3 decades in to have an experience with a plant that's, worthwhile sharing. So I love that message, Patricia. It's beautiful.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks, Rosalee. Thanks, Patricia.
Thanks, Mason. Thanks, Rosalee.
Absolutely.
All
Well, we're
right.
going to call it good here, and we're going to wrap up, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks so much for watching today's episode of the Herbalist Hour. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want more great herbal content, be sure to subscribe to our HerbRally YouTube channel. If you enjoy these Herbalist Hour episodes and you'd like to join us live, you can do so by becoming an HerbRally Schoolhouse member. Learn more at herbrally.com/schoolhouse. And if you want to get your first 30 days for free, use coupon code YouTube30 at checkout. So our HerbRally Schoolhouse members get access to exclusive video classes, monographs, and a lot more herbal community discounts, along with joining these live Herbalist Hour interviews. So one more time, herbrally.com/schoolhouse. Enter coupon code YouTube30 at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. All right, we'll see you in the next episode, and take care.